Hey everyone, it's me again, and today I want to talk about operating systems. I know, that's dry, boring, blah blah blah. But I've been wanting to do this for a while. I actually did have the video up earlier, but it just kind of went on, and I probably should have just broken it up into segments. So this is, I guess you would say, take two, and you know. I'm just going to go bit by bit, maybe explore 2 or 3 operating systems in one go, if I can do it quickly enough. So, here we go. This is where a lot of us old timers, I guess, I'm 48, and when I really started to gain an interest in computers, this is where it started, right here. Windows, it's MS-DOS. We didn't have Windows at the time. So, as you can see, it's all text-driven, and that in itself was a bit of a challenge because you had to learn all of these wonderful little commands, and sometimes that would just drive you nuts. Fortunately for me, I had the foresight to actually write down a lot of the commands back in the day, and I had my little book that was very helpful, and it allowed me to work with MS-DOS. MS-DOS was nice because you could actually do, there were certain graphical aspects to it. There were games that were written specifically for MS-DOS. I mean, okay, sound-wise they weren't great, and graphic-wise, let's face it, they were blocky, but at the time it was pretty nice. We really enjoyed that. But shortly after I started getting into MS-DOS, I also started to get into another operating system, one that had been out for a couple of years, but it was going to be my first experience into the world of the Windows operating system. So this was the very first experience I had with Windows 3.1. Okay, to be clear, I was actually using Windows 3.11, which was more set up for networks. It also was the version that allowed us to get onto the internet in its, when the internet was public, and it was referred to as the World Wide Web. And accessing it, of course, was done through dial-up, with using a phone. Oh, those were some days. We were just excited to have this sort of access. Oh God, now I'm going to start into some old person rant. You damn kids! We didn't have any. We had to dial up on an actual landline. That kind of thing. Windows 3.1, of course, it gave us a sense of where it would end up in the future. Of course, this was not actually an operating system in and of itself. It was a shell on top of MS-DOS. MS-DOS was actually the operating system. All this was, quite literally, was a program that did a lot of the MS-DOS things, but only it was done through a graphical interface, the GUI, the GUI. You had your accessories, word processor, paintbrush, all these little items. Some of these items would, with the Windows 9X series, that would come up afterwards. Well, a lot of this stuff would integrate into other programs. Some would disappear completely, like the card file would actually become more of a contacts thing. Object Packager, I believe that was something like a early version of a compression program, something like Zip. I could be wrong, and correct me if I am, please. Don't be afraid to say no. Actually, it was blah blah blah. of course, you had your games, startup applications, your main file. You had your file manager, which showed you everything that was on your drive in Windows. And as I mentioned, you notice on this tree view, there's the C drive, DOS, then Windows. DOS was the actual operating system, and there was your shell. It didn't really have much in the way of color. I believe it was like, what, 256 color was the max or something. It's been so long, I really don't remember. But it was there. It was good. We actually enjoyed it. It was, well, we enjoyed it simply because it's what we had, and we thought it was pretty good. And one thing about using Windows back in that day, being that Windows 3.1 was a shell, you didn't have to go through a whole lot of rigmarole when you were done. All you had to do was exit Windows. It takes you back to MS-DOS, and you shut your computer off. Done. Very simplistic. But that was one of the very first experiences I had with Windows, and a lot of good memories there. So with that, I got a little time. So let's have a look at Windows 95. So here's Windows 95, and this actually was pretty much a game changer for Windows. It retained a lot of the features that were brought in from Windows 3 point whatever, and improved upon them, added the taskbar, which made things a lot easier to deal with. Instead of having to go through multiple windows that would have popped up on your screen, you just had the taskbar right there. It also introduced the ever-present Start button, which made accessing programs much easier. The thing about the 9X series, as it would become to know, as people would come to know it, is that this was not necessarily a standalone operating system, but unlike the Windows 3X series, it wasn't even a shell. What this was, it was a hybrid. That's what they refer to this as, sort of a hybridized operating system. But there were a lot of things there were a lot of good things about it and a lot of bad things about it. It depends on who you ask. Myself, I really didn't see a whole lot of bad out of it. I have heard people refer to Windows 95 as the biggest virus that Microsoft ever created, next to Windows ME, but that's for another video. You had easier access to your settings. You had a control panel. You could work with your taskbar. It made printer access a lot easier. One thing about Windows 95 is it was, I believe, the beginning of easier access to plug-and-play devices, or as we used to refer to them, plug-and-pray devices. You plug them in and you pray they work. But it really did. It was a great improvement over the 3X series. I still actually do have an old laptop that runs on Windows 95. You can imagine it doesn't get a whole lot of use, but this also, Windows 95, it had built into it, the control panel, in fact, you could configure your modem, or accessing a network, whatever. But it was, it made things a lot easier. Connecting into the internet at that point, of course, With 3.1, you had to go through a whole rigmarole. Had to, and if memory serves me correctly, 3.11 had a WinSock program, because I do remember having to use that to access the internet back in the day when I was using 3.11. You didn't have that in Windows 95. Accessing the internet was completely different and so much easier. So, oops. I did not want to do that. So, I mean, I really don't have a lot of bad to say about Windows 95. I mean, certainly there might have been some issues, but this was the beginning of, the evolution of Windows to the operating system that we know, and depending on who you talk to, love or hate. So I'm going to end this one here, and next video up I'll be taking a look at Windows 98 and Windows ME. So hope you enjoyed this first installation, and hopefully I'll have the next one in short order. I'm Nariko Murakami. See ya.